All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to shift gears here a little bit. I know we've had some great presentations up to this point today, and I think we've got some great panelists here to take us into the afternoon. We're going to talk about physical security in the data center for the next half hour, and then open the questions up to the audience for about 10 minutes afterwards. My name is Pat Wilcox. I work for a company called Colliers International here in New York, and I head up our data center facilities advisory group. Probably wondering what a commercial real estate firm has to do with data centers. There are a few of us out there that specialize in the critical facilities that a lot of your companies sit inside of, and some of these panelists here are the ones who provide services and the facilities all across the country and all across the world. I'm involved in the site selection process for essentially the question of where do you put your data center, which of necessity these days involves outsourcing to a third party. You've got up here 5 panelists who represent companies that provide those third-party facility services with different layers and different levels of physical security attached to each asset and to each facility. So we're going to go through just a basic primer on what are the standards for physical security in the data center in 2018, look at this intersection between IT security and physical security, and then really ask the question, does it make any difference anymore? With all the threats we've looked at today, it seems that it might not be as important as we once thought it was, but I'm sure our panelists will have a number of different opinions on that topic. So, just wanted to go through in order from right to left. Directly to my left and your right is Bill Maury from Cyxtera Technologies. We've got David McCall here from QTS Data Centers. The one and only Phil Koblence from New York Internet.
What?
My esteemed colleague from Boston, Mark Sullivan from the Markley Group. And last but not least, Bill Wright, who's the operational lead for BT Americas. So I'll let them describe a little bit about what they do in a second. But wanted to just kind of go through, right off the bat, what are the 10 traditional physical security measures we see in virtually every data center across the country and across the world? We've got your usual suspects. Football field length setbacks from the street, perimeter fencing around the building, person traps, security guards, sometimes, not everywhere, but sometimes heavily armed, depending on who the provider is, different area controls inside the data center, closed circuit TVs, some type of scan, biometric or retina, badging system, cages, locking cabinets. That's about the universe of physical security these days. And of course, almost every data center has, if not all these elements, most of these elements, maybe 7 out of 10. And it creates an essential paradox for what we've been talking about today. The data center is essentially built like a prison. It's designed to keep devices in, but also at the same time, it has multiple and diverse tunnels to get back in to let people in and out. And that's really where the threat is. If our goal is to be keeping data safe, how do we organize teams internally that oversee physical security, IT security, and then also how do you get them to integrate seamlessly with third-party providers, which I think we got from our last presentation, typically today are not single-sourced. So you've got a lot of different people playing in a lot of different elements of keeping data safe, and a lot of measures taken in the data center to keep devices safe without really getting into the issue of how do we protect data. So with that in mind, it's a simple problem to solve. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, talk a little bit about how many data centers, what type of data centers they oversee, and how they address that problem. How far are they willing to go to really get into protection and control of data as a third-party provider, outsourced provider? Bill, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi. Thank you for the introduction as well. Cyxtera is an organization that focuses on secured infrastructure. We're newly formed, 1-year anniversary this past week in terms of our formation. But we have just over 55 global data centers positioned to provide a global platform of data center from which we also believe that that intersection that Pat referred to is highly relevant. And it is our belief that in addition to the physical premise-based security, that considering how somebody accesses the assets, the network that support those assets, and the data that's behind and lives with those assets is equally important. And we have a particular focus on aligning both the physical along with threat analytics, as well as a software-defined perimeter for user-based access control. So that's kind of where our focus and our mentality is as a company, to try to help bring that value to the market.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Hi, my name's Dave McCall. I am the director of the technology office for a data center company, technology company called QTS Data Centers. We're a North America based REIT data center company that also is, we are in this discussion is very relevant for us because we're in that, not only do we have these massive million square foot or larger data centers, but we also host private clouds for folks. We manage, we're in the managed services business, and so we're very much dealing with that intersection. Although we've recently deployed cavity searches, which is really reduced in most cases, but not all. Nothing, evidently that's common here in New York, but in Atlanta it's not very common, it's very unsettling. And so, that intersection of, one of the things that we believe, and I would like to know, thank you, Mark, very much for that. I like how all of us got the blue or brown coat memo and you got the pink shirt memo. I didn't get that. The ideas of the world now live in a data center. And we believe that. There isn't a recipe probably in a safe at Coca-Cola. It's in a data center. Microsoft's data center, our data center, your data center, one of these data centers, your data center. It's somebody's in the cloud or whatever. And protecting, whether it's the physical or the logical, that intersection is probably one of the, and we've heard throughout the day today, one of the most important things that all of us can be about.
Thanks, Dave.
Use both. I should. My name is Philip Koblence. I'm the COO of New York Internet. We're more of a regional data center provider. We have 2 facilities in the New York area, one in Lower Manhattan, one out in Bridgewater, New Jersey, about 40 miles outside the city, and provide full up-to-stack managed services, hybrid solutions for customers that run the gamut of verticals. And like I'm sure the rest of the panelists will agree, the data center is really the intersection of physical and virtual security. There's only so many things. I mean, Patrick rattled off the 10 components of physical security, and I think where we've gone beyond the late 90s and early 2000s of people having data centers in their parents' garages and basements and what have you. So once you reach a certain level of compliance requirement and you're able to sell to an enterprise user today, you've really touched on all those points, and it's really about figuring out how to assist customers in achieving some of the virtual security and that kind of the cyber type of security that they need to secure their own environments. I think for the most part, the physical security side is primarily aesthetic, and I think users in general, and this is probably not the most popular thing on the sales side, have to prepare for the worst case scenarios. You have to assume that the lowest hanging fruit in terms of physical access into a data center is the lowest amount of colo service that you provide. So if somebody really wants access to the data center, it's not unbelievably difficult to achieve it. And as a user of that space, you have to assume that you have to prepare for the fact that people that gain physical access to your equipment, they shouldn't be able to access any of the data on your infrastructure, and that's the focus is really on trying to establish security throughout the scope of the infrastructure.
Thanks, Phil.
Great. Mark Sullivan, Markley Group. We have a bit of a different approach up our way. We are a boutique juggernaut in New England. And for folks in this room that are trying to take something away, what we can most likely share with you is that there are no police in this business, and do not believe the marketing. Do your own due diligence, ask the hard questions, and bring engineering support with you. What we're finding right now, the big gap in understanding in data center practitioners and data center users are the skill sets of the practitioners are really becoming thinner and thinner. So in your organizations, do the homework, hire, contract, make sure you have somebody on staff that can really do that deep due diligence. We've had CIOs in our data centers for up to 9 and 10 hours with flashlights checking water connections. So look for the line drawings. Make sure you understand the physical security, but the infrastructure as well. It's something that's it's quickly overlooked, and it's always what comes back and bites.
Thank you, Mark.
So I'm Bill Wright. I'm from British Telecom, so I'm the lead operations manager for the U.S. You're going to ask me why I'm involved in security, but that is part of the physical piece. So I'm a site selector for BT, so a little unique because we have our own facilities that we manage, but I also go out to data centers to get into those facilities. So I'm in a particular data center with Mark next to me, and hope to be in everyone else's over the next 5 years to be able to tie into cloud-type business and things on our side. We are a product-type business, so BT works off several products. The big thing that we are looking for in our physical security piece when I do site selection is we go off point-type selection. So when I go to the data centers, we're looking at a 5-point type security before we get to our particular cage. That'll help us on our cage design, particular to data center where we come in with physical, looking at what's exterior, like Pat talked about, very large facilities, how are they perimeter supported, you know, with gates and CCTV would be a point 1. Getting into the actual parking area, how you access the building, point 2. Man traps, biometrics, iris scan, point 3. And then getting into the physical data center hall or hallway area prior to the actual data center, point 4, and then getting actually in towards the cage is 5. So I need 5 points of security before I get to my individual cage, and if I can't achieve that, then we look into floor-to-ceiling cage, CCTV within our own cage, biometric at our cage. So basically it comes down to how we design our cage based on the facility. So that's kind of why I'm here today, and like I said, I hope to be in everyone's data center here, getting through my 5-point security over the next 5 years, but that's what I do for British Telecom. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. So I'll pose a question to the panelists. I think when most of us think of data center, we're thinking something along the lines of a hyperscale facility, maybe from an AWS, a Microsoft, or you know, from QTS, having a large multi-tenant facility where there's a number of enterprises sitting side by side. How do all of you guys handle being in a building that has multiple uses? Because I think, you know, all of us in New York City are used to looking at 60 Hudson, looking at 111 8th Avenue, and knowing that while there are data centers in those buildings in particular spaces, they're not all data center. There are other comings and goings, other you know, human being risks that could be posed. How have you handled that? And I'll just kind of let the panelists go kind of back down the line here, because I know that many of you have data centers in buildings somewhere that have other uses.
Just for the folks in the room, we own a facility in Boston. It's a 2.5-acre facility. It's a little under 1 million square feet. And our strategy is that we have a first level, which is rented out for retail. They're cordoned off completely, but we've designed our security systems to take advantage of the traffic flow of people in and out of that facility, as far as our Eigenvasen and the way we work with our internal security team and mixing with the crowd. So we've embraced the fact that there's traffic around our facility.
Yeah, I think we might be the only ones on the panel that have a data center in an actual building in New York City. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's true. So I think in general, the way it works, and in the 60 Hudsons and 111 8s and 32 AFAs of the world, there's a lot of shared infrastructure that goes into the data centers in those buildings, because there's a lot of data centers in those buildings. But in our space at 100 William Street, that is primarily office space, with us having the data center on the top floor, what is incredibly important is that all the infrastructure associated with the data center be kind of home run into the data center, and not, you know, reliant upon any of the same infrastructure that that any of the other office tenants were to use. So the office tenants certainly benefit from the fact that we're in the building, because obviously we have, you know, lines coming in from other providers and multiple points of entry and whatnot. But I think one of the concerns typically in that environment, at least in the old school telecom world, would be that, you know, if somebody ordered a phone line or somebody ordered some line, that you could potentially affect critical infrastructure in the data center through that type of environment. But it's important, obviously, that whenever you have a multi-use building with a multi-tenant facility, or even an enterprise data center, that you make sure that the environment that the data center relies upon is completely segmented from the other commercial uses.
You know, one of the, who here's been to a mega data center, multi-tenant mega data center, several 100,000 square feet larger? Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. You know, thank you very much. I like that's enthusiastic. It is a fully operational Death Star, isn't it? You have, probably in many of our cases, we have some of the largest cloud providers or social media providers, or we call them hyperscales now, which I don't know when that word showed up, but it did.
About 18 months ago.
Whenever it did. And they're constantly transitioning in or adjusting or whatever. You have other multi-tenant folks coming and going. You have vendors coming and going. You know, in our world, we have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. You want to talk about security threats and the intersection of, Phil, you were talking about, you know, the demising of our core infrastructure to run the facility, our customers' infrastructure, because we've got to bill them, we've got to demise it so that they can stand stuff up and take stuff down without affecting the enterprise of anybody else. We have to control who's coming and going on the property, to your point about the 5 and many more steps. Then once we get into the, if I'm managing, like Bill and I were talking about earlier, I'm managing somebody's hybrid IT environment or their storage services or whatever, I've got to manage, we've talked about that today, the bastion hosts or the jump networks or the various network architecture infrastructure. I've got my employees coming, we've got contractors coming, we've got a vendor showing up, EMC, because somebody's array has got a predictive drive failure. There's a lot. It's a fully operational Death Star. We need to know who's going where, you know, doing concentric zones of security. How do I get to where? And then if there's an emergency, who's where in the data center so I can account for all of them to get them out. And I think that's for all of us. And so we're very cognizant of that demising and that adjusting and changing. And if we didn't have the ability to do that, we could never persuade anybody to land in our space. And one of the themes I've heard, I know you've all heard it as well today, throughout all of these devices. So that's just the regular big stuff, the electrical infrastructure, the mechanical infrastructure, the big things. With the world of Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything, whatever it is today, and all of these other devices. Who here ever watches that show iRobot, which I've recently been exposed to? I know I'm late to the party. They're always breaking into somebody's electrical infrastructure and tapping into, right? It's we've heard this over and over and over. What's the most common flaw? It's some small thing. Somebody didn't change their credentials that Gunnar was talking about in Microsoft, et cetera. Somebody didn't change a device. There's some static, the electrical grid out that we're managing. We have our own, in many situations, substations on site. And we need to make sure those components aren't hard-coded. There isn't some password that you can search for out there. All of these things are risks, the physical and the cyber risks that we're constantly trying to evaluate and mitigate against. And at the same time, in our case, build an automation platform that can handle that for us. A lot of words. Bill, take it away.
Thanks, Dave.
At the risk of being redundant, in our particular world, we are mostly purpose-built standalone data center, and where we are multi-tenant present, it's very much data center ecosystem as opposed to the use case you referred to earlier. So all the things that were mentioned, the being resilient and redundant about every potential risk factor that might occur, having all of those 5 points and then some characteristics about a mature operational practice. Those are the things that become the stability of which provide the data center physical presence and all of the other set of controls that cascade down ultimately to compliance and regulatory based requirement, but I think are fairly standard for the level of maturity of operations like these folks and myself provide. It is becoming more and more of a consternation of challenge, so that's why more and more people, even in this day and age, start to extend further to the relationships like companies like ours, as opposed to trying to do it all themselves, so they can concentrate on things much more valuable to their own environment. But I think the point that you're making that dovetails beyond that is once you've licked that, once you've been able to provide the high level of physical security, have the compliance, not just checkbox, but truly, exercised within a company so that you can prove that on an ongoing basis, mitigate your risk in truth, you then go into the other vulnerabilities, which are those stolen credentials, which are the access of network capabilities to get into a set of assets. And then you start having an entirely different mix of trouble, which needs to also be addressed and is attempted to be addressed. But in today's world, it's very hybrid oriented. There's providers like ourselves who have the same customer in multiple facilities in each of ours. They have their own data centers. They have access to public and private clouds in various iteration. So their challenges from a security perspective go well beyond the physical. So I think that's just something that dovetails to what these other gentlemen have said.
Thank you, Bill. The phrase managed services gets thrown around quite a bit in the data center business, and essentially everybody up here is in the business of providing electrical redundancy, cooling redundancy, access to multiple networks, cross connects, and compliance standards, whether it be PCI, HIPAA, any type of SOX compliance. Is there a line, and are you seeing more and more questions coming to you about taking on control of or responsibility for customer data? Because I know it comes up a lot, and there's usually a line where we will stop at the OS, we will stop at the facility, we will not get into customer data. So all you folks out in the audience today are either on your own or you have to bring in yet another third party to come and manage those things. But where are you seeing that trend going today?
So first, we're seeing quite a bit of request for how can the flow down of what their clients are challenged with to try to be responsible for in terms of the protection of that data. They're trying to leverage partnerships like ours as best they can. But as part of that equation, in our particular world, we segment ourselves away from the touching of data. We're not in the managed environment like some of my peers here, where we're potentially touching custom bid or application platform layer product. So we're purely an infrastructure service play and protecting it in a very different manner in that regard. But the request is often to, at the minimum, either clearly show that you are not touching it so that we become a known non-risk, or show how we have a series of processes in place to protect that in the event. The only thing we'll get involved with is if somebody needs to exit a set of systems, how can we help them in the destruction of data and that type of thing. But that would be the limit from our point of view.
Yeah, very similar. It's a risk we don't want to take on to get to somebody's data. So if we're managing a system or something like that, it's going to be to the OS. Having said that, when we say data, we mean their data. So if I'm giving them DSIM data, electrical infrastructure information, et cetera, we've created APIs now. I think that's where the world's going through automation. We've digitized pretty much our entire data center. We've aggregated that data. My CTO, he's British, so we'll forgive him, but he keeps running around saying a data lake. Nobody likes data lakes in their data center. I don't know if he knows how this water thing works, but not a lot of humidity allowed. But in any event, so he brings it, he loves to say the data lake, and then we analyze it and we automate it, which is absolutely true. The hyperscalers, they want access to, and most of our customers, in fact, we're now managing this down. We use DivvyCloud and other tools so that we give customers access to their data. We give them bots, either that are open source or available. We turn that over to them, or we've created our own APIs throughout the infrastructure because people want visibility and control. And then to your point, I love the way you said that, Bill. They want to know that we're a known non-risk, that we can manage through that. We get audited annually by one of the big 5 firms, as most folks do, just to make sure not only do we have the controls, but we're using the controls. But we do not like to touch the customer's proprietary data as opposed to the data that we're generating up and serving their infrastructure. It's just not a core business of ours.
I mean, I think what all of us would agree on is managing the data center is kind of a full-time job. So, from the standpoint of people that operate data centers that really manipulate customer data, I think they're few and far between, especially if the data center is of any scale. And our jobs collectively are to allow our customers to focus on their core competencies. And in general, their core competencies are reliant upon that data. So the short answer is no, we don't touch our customer data. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find a data center provider that would certainly admit to being able to touch customer data, much less advertise that they will take ownership of customer data.
Certainly, all that. Our environments are all source encryption, encrypted delivery, and then most of our sophisticated clients right now are going to an active-active model. An active data center with a backup or DR model, that was probably 5-7 years ago. Today, the sophisticated clients of ours are using an active-active environment with source encryption, encrypted in transmission, and then where we provide any kind of VMware-based stack services is an augmentation, mostly to network traffic, and certainly all firewalled off via the vSphere devices, so that there's no chance of us interacting with their data.
So with BT, we're a little bit different than what we talked about. So we do have a fully managed service product. It was bought out from a company called Radiance. So we have BT Radiance, which is fully managed service. We take on the full contract from actually owning the customer equipment. We configure it, we install it, we rack it, stack it, and we manage it to a full potential from the facility itself. We have 3 facilities in the U.S., 2 in the U.K. They are disaster recovery, so we have multiple setups in multiple places for those customers. The security is what I talked about before. It's very difficult to get into those facilities because of the fact that it's a lot of financial traffic. And what we do there is we have support teams that are 24/7. A good point came up before when we talk about electrical systems, we talk about generators, we talk about HVAC. A lot of the building management systems are automated systems. They're remotely accessed by either the provider of that systems, like a Siemens or an Automated Logic. They can come in remotely to make changes. They can do some preventive maintenance. Our people who are home could tie in and see one of our facilities. 4 years ago, we did away with that because of cyber issues, worrying about people being able to come in and touch our infrastructure remotely. So we have now gone to a 24/7 model where those service technicians, certified electricians, HVAC maintenance people are actually on site 24/7 to manage those operational procedures. This way, nobody has to come in remotely. So people at home will get calls from our 24/7 knock if they need more support versus the 2 or 3 people that might be on a night shift. Maybe they need 2 more people, 3 more people to come in on support. It's actually due now to do a phone type call or a email out to their phone telling them to come on site. So those are the type of things what we do to kind of protect that data, also protect anybody to break into those operational systems. So.
Sure, Bill.
Just to kind of dovetail on that, one of the things that we referred to earlier, I mentioned in kind of part of our philosophy, is this idea of the software-defined perimeter. And very simply put, it's a individual user-to-service connection, a one-to-one segment. And the idea, and a good use case, is just what you're describing, when a lot of the management service plane and those administrators that need to access the environment, the third parties that need to come into the systems, The extraordinary thing there is how do I keep and maintain productivity from them reaching externally, but not using a VPN, another potentially high-risk access point. But if I can provide for them the visibility to only what they need to do their business and their job in the context of which meets a security profile in force, then they can still get the best of both worlds. You can use a software-defined perimeter in the context of a data center and security practice to be able to allow those things to occur. So just food for thought.
I think we're at our 30 minutes, and I want to leave 10 minutes just open to questions from the audience. So this is the interactive portion. So with all of these physical security measures that data center operating companies can take, the question is that what difference does it really make in light of all the threats that we're seeing today from outside the data center? So a data center can protect against the bad actors. It can protect against disgruntled employees. It can protect against the grid going down. You know, one carrier's fiber being cut. You know, you have multiple providers. You can protect against an outage in the middle of the night where somebody's there essentially to do a reboot or provide some remote hands. But what does this really provide to the folks who are thinking about protecting their company's data or their customers' data? Does it just give a feeling or perception of safety? Does it provide actual safety from any number of entities? Is it a minimum level of care so as not to be considered negligent in selecting where the data center sits, or taking the full, contrarian view? Is there no real meaningful protection at all by adding layers of physical security in the data center? And we wanted to open the floor up to comments, questions, and see what you thought. I think we got a question over on the side.
Gentleman in the corner.
Yes, on the corner.
Thank you. The discussion topic is, does enhanced physical security provide any meaningful protection? And I would say both A and C, because again, it depends on how you're doing it, both a feeling and perception of safety and a minimum level of care. Yes, I'm sure it's not, this is such a problem is not just binary. It's not just security or no security. There's a spectrum of how well the security is done, with one end of the spectrum being more, really good, the other end not so good. So it really depends on how you implement it.
Yeah, just a quick comment. You know, it's all additive. You're not going to set up a shed and put some racks out on a slab, and right. If you have a vehicle, we've gone from seat belts. We didn't stop doing seat belts. We added airbags to them. We've added anti-lock brakes. We've added predictive lane changing. We've added HUD. In the next 2 or 3 years, there will be autonomous vehicles. These things are additive. You don't remove them. And I think that's the case, right? It is a combination of things that makes the security of the data center, whether you're providing it physically or the provider's providing it for themselves. Any other quick comments, Bill?
So you kind of hit it right on the head when you said procedures. So the key with security, and I'm sure we all feel the same, is as years go on, the procedures are key, right? To keep up on those procedures. Mainly, and I know everybody sitting next to me goes through multiple, if not, I know we go through probably 60 audits per year. So we keep up with those security standards through customer audits. So I know we do an audit in the Markley building on our own. Even though Markley does their own audits, we still go in there as a customer of Markley to do our own audit. And I think that's how we just keep to make sure that all the procedures are still up to date. Everything is being followed to standard. And like you hit it right on the head, standards are going to constantly change, right? We've gone from retina scans years ago that were, 10 years out. Nobody knew the technology. Somebody came up with the idea that you could pull a retina out. It's only good for, 20 seconds. The retina dies. It can't be picked up on a scanner. So all types of different technology every year comes out, things change. And the key is procedure, just making sure you stay up with those procedures and you keep on making sure that everybody's following them.
I think I'm getting the shepherd's hook here on time. Do we have time for one more? Very short.
Can you guys talk about your procedures for handling?
Oh.
Can you guys talk about can you guys talk about your procedures for handling forensics requirements, like your customers requesting for memory forensic, hard disk forensic, and things like that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
Could we
Just look up
continue
SOC
this in the
2 and
hall?
SOC 1.
Can we continue this in the hall? It's a great question. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and we really appreciate it.